Day One wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked through the narrow corridors of Station Valora. His toolbox felt heavier than usual today, or maybe he was just tired. 6 months working on this massive space station, and he still sometimes got lost in its endless hallways. The station was huge, built to house hundreds of different alien species, each with their own needs and fears. His communication device beeped. Another repair job. This time in Section 7, the residential quarter that everyone whispered about. Day One sighed and checked the assignment details. Environmental controls malfunction. Vrexian quarters. He noticed the warning label flashing red on his screen, the one that appeared for dangerous assignments. Most human workers would have complained or asked for hazard pay. Day One just shouldered his toolbox and headed that direction. He had heard the rumors, of course. Everyone on the station had. The Vrexian family had arrived 3 weeks ago, and since then people avoided Section 7 entirely. Traders refused to deliver supplies. Other residents filed complaints about feeling unsafe. Even the security officers looked nervous when patrol routes took them near the Vrexian quarters. Day One did not understand all the fear. Yes, the Vrexians were big. Yes, they looked like the predators from Earth's ancient history books, all scales and claws and sharp teeth. But they had not hurt anyone. They kept to themselves, paid their docking fees on time, and followed every station rule. His friend G1, who worked in the diplomatic section, had told him that the Vrexian family seemed sad and frustrated by how everyone treated them. The corridor grew quieter as Day One entered Section 7. The lights here were dimmer, adjusted for species that preferred less brightness. He could feel the temperature rising too. Vrexians came from a high-gravity world with much more heat than Earth. The environmental systems worked hard to keep their quarters comfortable. He found the right door and pressed the call button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door slid open, and Day One found himself looking up at the tallest being he had ever seen in person. Vorath stood nearly 8 feet tall. His scales were dark gray, almost black, with patterns of blue light running along his arms and neck. Those lights pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat you could see. His eyes were golden with vertical pupils, and when he looked down at Day One, those eyes widened in surprise. "You are the maintenance worker?" Vorath's voice was deep, with a rumbling quality that Day One could feel in his chest. "Yes, sir. I am here to fix your environmental controls." "May I come in?" Vorath stared at him for a long moment. "You are not afraid?" It was not a question, but Day One answered anyway. "No, sir. I am just here to do my job." Something changed in Vorath's expression. The tension in his shoulders relaxed slightly. He stepped aside and gestured for Day One to enter. "Please, come in. My mate Silkro will be grateful. The temperature has been dropping at night. Our children need warmth." Day One walked into the quarters and immediately understood the challenge. The environmental controls were old, designed for the station's original construction decades ago. They struggled to maintain the high heat Vrexians needed. He set down his toolbox and began examining the wall panel. A soft chirping sound made him look up. 3 small faces peeked around the corner of a doorway. The Vrexian cubs were much smaller than their father, maybe 3 feet tall, with lighter scales that held hints of green and blue. Their bioluminescent markings flickered rapidly, showing their excitement or curiosity. 6 golden eyes stared at Day One with intense focus. "Crix Vena Taurak. Come away from there. Let the human work." A female Vrexian emerged from another room. Silkro was slightly smaller than her mate, but no less impressive. Her scales had more green tones, and her markings pulsed in a different pattern. The cubs did not move. They continued watching Day One with fascination. "It is okay," Day One said, pulling out his tools. "They are not bothering me." Silkro made a sound that might have been surprise or relief. "Most beings run from our children. They think Crix and her siblings are dangerous." Day One glanced at the cubs again. They looked like children unaware, curious and playful. One of them, the smallest, made a soft trilling noise. "They just look like kids to me," he said simply, then turned his attention to the control panel. The work was complicated. The circuits were fried from overuse, pushing too hard to create heat the system was not designed to provide. Day one lost himself in the repair, carefully replacing components and rerouting power. Time passed. The cubs crept closer, watching his every move. He could hear their claws clicking softly on the floor. The quarters grew warmer as Day One worked. His uniform jacket, designed for normal station temperatures, became uncomfortable. He paused, setting down his tools, and removed the jacket. The fabric was worn and soft from many washings, with his name stitched on the front. He folded it and placed it on a nearby bench. Immediately, all three cubs moved toward the jacket. They did not touch it, but they sniffed the air around it. Their markings flickering faster. "I apologize for their behavior," Vorath said, moving to call the cubs back. "It is fine," Day One assured him, returning to his work. "They are just curious." It took another hour to complete the repairs. When Day One finally closed the panel and tested the system, warm air flowed steadily through the vents. Sokra made a grateful sound, her markings pulsing with what Day One guessed was relief or happiness. "Thank you," she said. "You have no idea how much this means to us." The cold was making the children restless. Day One packed his tools, nodding. "Just doing my job. If it acts up again, just submit another request. I will come back. You would return?" Vorath asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Of course. Why would I not?" The two adult Vrexians exchanged a look that Day One could not quite interpret. He picked up his toolbox and headed for the door, then remembered his jacket. When he turned back, he saw all three cubs gathered around the bench where he had left it. They were not touching it, but they stood very close. Their small heads tilted as they examined it. "Crix, move away from the human's belongings," Sokra commanded gently, the smallest cub. Crix looked up at her mother, then at Day One. She chirped softly, a sound that seemed almost questioning. "It is okay," Day One said. He walked over and picked up his jacket. The cubs scattered back a few steps but did not run far. Up close, he could see that their scales were softer than their parents', still developing. Crix's markings pulsed in a rapid, excited pattern. Day One smiled slightly and gave a small wave. "See you around?" he said to the family, then left the quarters. Behind him, the cubs chirped to each other in their own language, their voices high and eager. Vorath and Sokra watched the human disappear down the corridor, both feeling something they had not felt since arriving at the station, hope in their sleeping room. The cubs were supposed to take their afternoon rest period. It was important for young Vrexians to sleep regularly or they became hyperactive and difficult to control. But Crix, Venna, and Talrock were too excited to sleep. They had met a human, a soft, small creature who did not fear them, who smiled at them, who had left behind the most interesting smell they had ever encountered. They would think about that smell all day, and when rest time came again, they would have an idea. The next day started badly for everyone in Section 7. Day One heard about the incident before he even reached the Vrexian quarters. A merchant had physically blocked Vorath from entering the public marketplace, claiming that predators made other customers uncomfortable. Security had been called. Angry words were exchanged. The situation had been resolved without violence, but tension hung over the entire station like a storm cloud. G-1 called him as he walked through the corridors. Her face appeared on his communication device, looking worried. "Did you hear what happened this morning?" "Yes, everyone is talking about it. The diplomatic office is trying to smooth things over, but it is difficult. The merchant has filed a formal complaint. He wants the Vrexian family removed from the station." One shook her head. "It is not fair. They have done nothing wrong." Day One agreed, but did not know what to say. He was just a maintenance worker, not a diplomat. "I have to return to their quarters today. I left my jacket there yesterday. Be careful. Security Officer Hyan Wu told me there might be protests later. Some residents are scared." After ending the call, Day One continued to Section 7. He did feel slightly foolish about forgetting his jacket, but he had been tired after the long repair job. He hoped the family would not mind him returning so soon. When he reached the Vrexian quarters, he could hear raised voices before the door even opened. Voreth's deep rumble mixed with Sokra's higher, more agitated tone. They were speaking in their own language, but the emotion was clear. They were upset. Day One pressed the call button and waited. The voices inside stopped abruptly. The door opened and Sokra appeared. Her markings were pulsing in a rapid, irregular pattern that Day One had not seen before. Her golden eyes were wide with worry. Human Day One, this is not a good time. We are searching for our children. Day One felt his stomach drop. The cubs are missing? They were supposed to be in rest period. This is critical for young Vrexians. Without proper sleep, they become dangerous, even to themselves. We cannot find them anywhere in our quarters. Sokra's voice cracked slightly. We have searched every room, every storage space. They are small enough to fit into the ventilation system. They could be anywhere on the station by now. Voreth appeared behind his mate, his expression grim. We must search the corridors, but if we leave our quarters, station residents will panic. They already fear us. If they see us moving through the station looking frantic. The situation was worse than Day One realized. He thought quickly. I can help search. Tell me what the cubs look like when they are hiding. Do they have favorite spots? They like warm, dark places, Sokra said, enclosed spaces where they feel safe. Day One nodded and stepped into the quarters. I will check areas you might have missed. Sometimes an outside perspective helps. He moved through the main living space, looking in corners and behind furniture. The Vrexian quarters were decorated simply, with heating panels on the walls and thick padding on the floors. He checked. The kitchen area, the sleeping rooms, even the small storage closets. Nothing. Then he remembered his jacket. He had set it on a bench in the main room, but it was not there now. Day One frowned and began looking around more carefully. If the cubs had moved his jacket, where would they take it? He found them in a small alcove near the environmental controls he had repaired yesterday. The space was barely visible, tucked behind a decorative panel that slid aside. Day One almost missed it, but he noticed scratch marks on the floor leading that direction. All three Vrexian cubs were curled together in a pile on his jacket. Their scales rose and fell with slow, peaceful breathing. Their bioluminescent markings pulsed in perfect synchronization, a slow rhythm that reminded Day One of a lullaby. Crix, the smallest, had her head tucked under Vena's arm. Taurog's tail was wrapped around both his siblings. They looked completely at peace. Day One stood very still. He did not want to wake them. Slowly, carefully, he backed away from the alcove and returned to the main room where Voreth and Sokra were preparing to search the corridors. I found them, he said quietly. Both parents turned to him with desperate hope on their alien faces. Sokra made a sound like a sob. Where? Are they hurt? They are sleeping. Come with me, but please be quiet. He led them to the alcove and pointed. Voreth and Sokra stared in absolute shock at their sleeping children. For a long moment nobody spoke. I do not understand, Sokra finally whispered. They refuse to sleep anywhere except their thermal nest. The nest maintains precise temperature and has specific textures they need. How are they sleeping on a human garment in a random corner? Voreth crouched down, studying his children carefully. Look at their markings. They are in deep rest phase. This is the best sleep they have had since we arrived at the station. It is my jacket, Day One said, feeling like he should explain. I left it here yesterday. I am sorry. I should have taken it with me. Do not apologize, Voreth said, his voice filled with wonder. You have given us an impossible gift. Our children are resting peacefully. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made them all turn. Ji-Won appeared at the door, slightly out of breath, with security officer Hyan-Woo behind her. Both stopped short when they saw everyone gathered around the alcove. We heard there was an emergency, Hyan-Woo said. He was a tall man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. His hand rested on his security equipment, ready for trouble. The cubs were missing, Sokra explained. We found them sleeping. Ji-Won moved closer, peering at the alcove. Her eyes went wide. They are sleeping on Day One's jacket. That is your jacket, right? Yes. Han-Woo leaned in to look, his professional expression softening. They look like Puppies, he said, then immediately looked embarrassed. I apologize, I did not mean to be disrespectful. It is accurate, Vorth said, a hint of amusement in his voice. They do look like young animals when they sleep. Most beings never see this side of them. They only see the claws and teeth. One pulled out her communication device and started recording. This is remarkable. Do you mind if I document this? My office has been trying to help improve relations with your family. This could change how people see you. Sokra hesitated, looking at her sleeping children. What would you do with such documentation? Show it to station residents, G1 said honestly. Let them see that your children are just children. That they feel safe and peaceful, just like anyone else's kids. Before anyone could answer, another voice called from the door. What is happening here? I received an alert about a Vrexian emergency. A human woman entered, older than the others, with gray hair and kind eyes. She wore the uniform of a medical professional. Day one did not recognize her. I am Dr. Beora, she said. I am a child psychologist attending a conference on the station. Security contacted me in case there was a situation with young beings. She stopped when she saw the sleeping cubs. Oh my. She approached slowly, professionally, studying the scene with expert eyes. May I examine them? Not touch, just observe? Vorth and Sokra exchanged glances, then nodded. Dr. Beora crouched near the alcove, her eyes moving over the cubs carefully. She looked at their breathing patterns, their relaxed muscle tone, the way they held each other. This is extraordinary, she murmured. Their body language shows complete trust and security. They feel absolutely safe here. On a human jacket, Hyan Wu said, shaking his head. In a corner, not in their special bed. The jacket has my scent on it, Day One said, trying to make sense of it. Maybe that is part of it? Dr. Beora looked at him with sudden interest. You work with the family? I repaired their environmental controls yesterday. The cubs watched me work. And you were not afraid of them? Day One shrugged. No, why would I be? Dr. Beora smiled. That might be more important than you realize. Children, even alien children, are very sensitive to emotions. These cubs probably sensed your calm acceptance. To them, you represent safety. Sokra made a soft sound, her markings flickering with emotion. No one has ever made our children feel safe before. Not outside our homeworld. The cubs continued sleeping, undisturbed by the quiet conversation around them. Crix made a small chirping sound in her sleep, and her siblings adjusted their positions slightly, still holding on to each other. Word of the discovery spread through the station communication networks faster than anyone expected. By evening, dozens of beings knew that the terrifying Vrexian predator cubs had been found sleeping peacefully on a human's jacket. Some thought it was impossible. Some thought it was a trick. But others began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong about the VREXIANS. In Section 7. Vorth and Sokra sat with Day One after the cubs finally woke up. They asked him a question that would change everything. Would you help us understand why this happened? Would you spend time with our children so we can learn what makes them feel safe? Day One looked at the three cubs, who were watching him with bright, curious eyes. He thought about his simple life as a maintenance worker and how complicated this might become. Then he smiled. Yes, I will help. The research laboratory on Station Valora was designed for studying many different types of life. Dr. Thelvix, an insectoid scientist with multiple eyes and clicking mandibles, had eagerly offered the space for studying the unusual bond between Day One and the Vrexian cubs. The lab had observation rooms, testing equipment, and enough space for even large beings to move comfortably. Day One felt nervous standing in the center of the observation area. Cameras recorded everything. Scientists from 4 different species watched through transparent walls. G1 stood nearby with her recording equipment, documenting everything for the diplomatic office. Next to her was Unji, a human cultural anthropologist who had arrived on the station just 2 days ago after hearing about the situation. Just act natural, Unji said, adjusting her glasses. She was younger than Day One expected, with bright eyes full of curiosity. Pretend the cameras are not here. We want to see genuine interaction. That is difficult when 20 beings are watching me, Day One muttered. The door to the side chamber opened, and Sokra led the 3 cubs into the room. Crix, Venna, and Talrock looked around with wide eyes, their markings pulsing rapidly. The new environment made them nervous. They pressed close to their mother, small claws gripping her legs. Then Venna spotted Day One. Her markings flashed bright blue, and she chirped excitedly. Within seconds, all 3 cubs bounded across the room toward him, their claws clicking on the smooth floor. They circled around Day One, trilling and chirping, their tails swishing with happiness. Remarkable, Dr. Thelvix clicked from behind the glass. Note the immediate recognition and positive response. Day One crouched down to the cub's level. Talrock immediately pressed his scaled head against Day One's hand. The scales felt warm and surprisingly smooth, like sun-heated river stones. Crix chirped at him, and Venna attempted to climb onto his shoulders, her small claws catching on his uniform. Venna, be gentle, Sokra warned from across the room. For the next hour, the scientists conducted various tests. They had other humans enter the room to see if the cubs responded the same way. The cubs were curious but cautious with strangers, keeping their distance. Only with Day One did they show complete trust. EUN-G explained her theory during a break. Humans have something we call pack bonding instinct. We form emotional connections with almost anything, even beings very different from us. Throughout Earth history, humans have bonded with animals, plants, even robots and machines. But how does that affect the cubs? Vorith asked. He sat in a corner of the observation room, watching his children play with Day One through the glass. When humans are relaxed and comfortable, our bodies produce certain chemicals. Some of these are released through our skin, in our sweat and natural oils. The cubs can probably smell these chemicals. To them, Day One smells safe and calm. Unji pulled up data on her tablet. We tested his jacket. The fabric absorbed his scent over many weeks of wearing. That concentrated scent is even more powerful. Dr. Thelvix added, we compared responses to worn and unworn human clothing. The cubs showed significant preference for garments that had been worn regularly. Fresh clothing had minimal effect. Sokra's markings pulsed thoughtfully. So it is not just that he is human. It is that he is specifically Day One, with his unique scent and calm nature. Exactly, Yonji confirmed over the following week. Day One found himself spending several hours each day with the cubs. The scientists had completed their formal testing, but the cubs had grown so attached that separating them caused distress. Vorith and Sokra requested that Day One continue visiting, not as a research subject, but as a friend to their family. Day-One discovered that Vrexian cubs were not so different from human children. They played games, got into mischief, and had distinct personalities. Crix was thoughtful and gentle, often watching before joining in activities. She liked to bring Day One interesting objects she found, laying them at his feet like gifts. Smooth pebbles, shiny bits of metal, even a discarded circuit board that somehow seemed precious to her. Venna was the bold one. She climbed on everything, tested every boundary, and frequently got stuck in places she should not have been. Day One spent considerable time rescuing her from ventilation grates, storage compartments, and once, somehow, the inside of a cleaning robot. Talrock was curious about everything. He asked questions constantly in his chirping language, which Sokra translated. He wanted to know how human hands worked, why Day One's skin was so soft, what Earth looked like, why humans wore clothes. His curiosity was endless and endearing. One afternoon, Day One taught the cubs a simple human game. He found 3 containers and hid a small treat under one, then moved them around. The cubs had to guess which container held the treat. They caught on quickly, their sharp eyes tracking every movement. Soon they were chittering with excitement. Competing to be the first to point at the correct container, other station residents began to notice the changes. The cubs, who once never left their quarters, now explored Section 7 with Day One. They walked beside him as he did maintenance work, their small forms trailing behind him like a strange parade. At first, other beings still avoided them. But slowly, something shifted. A merchant saw the cubs playing a chasing game with Day One in a corridor. Instead of fleeing, she paused to watch. "They are just babies," she said to her companion. Sounding surprised, an elderly being from a species Day One did not recognize approached him one day while the cubs examined a malfunctioning light panel. "Are they dangerous?" the elder asked. Day One looked at the three cubs. Venna was trying to catch dust particles in the light beam. Talrock was asking questions about electricity. Crix was contentedly leaning against Day One's leg. "Only if you consider curiosity and enthusiasm dangerous," he answered. The elder made a sound like laughter and shuffled away. Shaking their head, the cubs started bringing Day One gifts regularly. Shiny objects were their favorites, but they also brought things they thought were valuable. Crix once presented him with a live insect she had caught, incredibly proud of her hunting skills. The insect was harmless, one of the station's native pests. But Crix's joy at showing off her prowess was impossible to dismiss. "Thank you," Day One had said seriously, accepting the wriggling insect. "This is an excellent catch." Crix's markings had pulsed so brightly with happiness that Sokra later told him it was the Vrexian equivalent of a child beaming with pride. One evening, G1 visited Day One's own quarters. She looked tired but satisfied. "The diplomatic office is getting requests from other stations now. They want to know how we achieved peaceful integration with a predator species family." "We just treated them like people," Day One said simply. "Yes, but you were the bridge. You showed everyone that it was safe." One sat down, pulling up reports on her tablet. "There is more. Other predator species on the station have started coming forward. They have been hiding their children, keeping them isolated because they feared the reaction. But after seeing how people respond to the Vrexian cubs now, they are starting to hope things can change." Day One had not realized the impact was so large. He thought about the cubs, about their joy at playing in the corridors, their excitement at meeting new beings. No child should have to hide who they are. A few days later, Hyunwoo contacted Day One during a maintenance job. "We have a situation. The Vrexian cubs are in the marketplace with their parents. There is a crowd gathering." Day One's heart jumped. He ran toward the marketplace, fearing the worst. When he arrived, he stopped in confusion. There was indeed a crowd, but nobody looked angry or afraid. They were watching the cubs with curiosity and something that looked like amusement. The cubs had discovered a fountain in the marketplace center. The water fascinated them. They were carefully touching the spray, chirping with delight when droplets landed on their scales. Venna tried to catch the water stream in her mouth, while Talrock studied the fountain's mechanics with intense focus. Crix sat at the edge, gently trailing her claws through the pool. Vorath and Sokra stood nearby, looking amazed at the peaceful scene. An audience of various species watched, some even smiling. A small alien child approached cautiously and pointed at the fountain, asking their parent a question. The parent nodded, and the child moved closer to watch alongside the cubs. Day One walked up to Sokra. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," she said softly. "Look at them. They're just being children, and people are accepting it." That night, as Day One returned to his quarters, he received a message from Vorath. "My merchant guild is facing problems at Station Nexus Prime. I must travel there to defend our trading rights. Sokra wants to come with me, but the cubs refuse to leave you. Would you consider helping us? Just for 1 week." Day One looked at the message for a long moment, then typed his reply. "Of course. I will help." Day One stood in the Vrexian quarters, surrounded by 3 chirping cubs who did not fully understand why their parents were leaving. Vorath and Sokra explained the situation patiently, but Crix kept climbing onto her mother's back, refusing to let go. "I do not know if this is wise," Sokra said, gently removing Crix's claws from her scales for the 3rd time. "They have never been away from us for so long." "They will be fine," Vorath assured her, though his markings showed his own worry. "Day One has proven trustworthy, and Biora and Hyunwoo have agreed to help supervise." Ambassador Taeyang arrived just as Vorath and Sokra were preparing to depart. He was an older human with gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. His diplomatic uniform was perfectly pressed. He carried himself with quiet authority. "I wanted to meet the cubs before you left," he said to the parents, "and to assure you that Station Valora will protect your children in your absence." Silkra's markings pulsed with gratitude. "Thank you, Ambassador. This means everything to us. Your family has done more for interspecies relations in a few weeks than some diplomats achieve in years," Taeyang said. "That deserves our protection and support." After the parents left, the cubs were quieter than usual. They pressed close to day one, their markings dim and slow. Vena, usually so energetic, barely moved from his side. Even when Bur arrived with special treats, they showed little interest. "They missed their parents," Bur observed. "This is normal. Give them time to adjust." By the second day, the cubs began to recover their spirits. Day one kept them busy with activities and games. He took them on his maintenance rounds, letting them help with simple tasks. Taurok proved surprisingly good at finding small problems that day one might have missed, his sharp eyes spotting loose panels and worn connections. Everything seemed to be going well until the fourth day, when day one took the cubs to the marketplace for lunch. It was early afternoon, and the market was crowded with beings from dozens of species. The cubs walked close to day one, looking around with interest but staying calm. Then something went wrong. A tall, four-armed merchant shouted and pointed at the cubs. His translator made his words harsh and angry. "Predators! Why are dangerous creatures allowed here?" Several nearby beings turned to look. A few moved away quickly. The cubs' markings began pulsing rapidly, showing their stress. "They are just children," Day One said firmly. "They are not dangerous. Not dangerous. Look at those claws, those teeth." The merchant's four arms gestured wildly. "One day they will grow large and hurt someone. We should remove them now, before tragedy happens." A small crowd was forming. Some beings nodded in agreement with the merchant. Others looked uncertain. The cubs pressed against Day One's legs, trying to hide behind him. Crix was shaking. Han Wu appeared through the crowd, his security uniform making beings step aside. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes, there is a problem," the merchant insisted. "These creatures should not be allowed in public spaces." Before Haiyan Wu could respond, something unexpected happened. A small, furry being pushed through the crowd. She was elderly, with silver fur and kind eyes. She walked directly up to the cubs, who were still hiding behind Day One. "May I?" She asked Day-1. He nodded, not sure what she intended. The elderly being held out her hand toward Crix. The small cub looked up at Day One uncertainly. He gave her an encouraging nod. Very slowly, Crix reached out and touched the offered hand with one claw, gentle as a butterfly landing. The elderly being smiled. "My granddaughter plays with these cubs every day in Section 7. She tells me they are kind and funny. She tells me they share their toys and never hurt anyone." She turned to face the merchant. "I trust my granddaughter's judgment. These are children." "Good children," other voices joined in. A being who worked in environmental services spoke up. "I see the human maintenance worker with the cubs often. They are always well behaved." A merchant from a different stall added, "The cubs come to my shop sometimes. They look at the shiny objects but never steal or break anything." The hostel merchant looked around, realizing the crowd's mood had shifted. He made an angry gesture and stalked away. The tension broke. Beings returned to their shopping. The cubs slowly relaxed. The elderly being knelt down, looking at all three cubs. "You are safe here, little ones. Do not let one angry person make you afraid." That evening, news of the marketplace incident spread through station communications. But the story that spread was not about dangerous predators. It was about children being defended by the community. About beings standing up for what was right. Ambassador Taeyang contacted Day One that night. "I heard what happened today. How are the cubs?" "Shaken, but okay. They are sleeping now." "Good. I want you to know that I've been in contact with Vorath and Silkra at Nexus Prime. The situation there is more complicated than expected. They are facing significant discrimination, and the Merchant Guild is threatening to revoke their trading license." Day one felt anger rise in his chest. That is not fair. They have done nothing wrong. I agree. Which is why I'm sending them documentation and videos of everything that has happened here on Valora. The Cubs' story. The way the community has grown to accept and even protect them. Taeyang paused. Sometimes the best argument is simply showing people the truth. The next day brought another crisis. Crix developed a fever. Her scales felt hot even for a Vrexian, and she moved sluggishly. Biora examined her and determined it was similar to a common cold. Nothing serious, but Crix felt miserable. Day one stayed with her through the night. He sat on the floor of the Vrexian quarters with his back against the wall, and Crix curled up against his side. She was heavier than he expected, her body radiating heat, but he did not move. Every time he tried to adjust his position, she made a sad, chirping sound. So he stayed still. Venna and Talrock brought their sister water and soft foods. They tried to comfort her with gentle chirps and by pressing their heads against hers. But Crix only seemed to truly relax when she was tucked against Day one, her small head resting on his leg. Biora checked on them several times through the night. During one visit, she took a photograph with her device. This moment is important, she said quietly. The trust required for a sick child to accept comfort from someone so different. This is the future of interspecies relations. By morning, Crix's fever had broken. She was still weak but feeling better. She refused to leave Day one's side, following him everywhere as he moved through the quarters. That afternoon, something remarkable happened. Counselor Vren, a high-ranking official known for his conservative views on interspecies interaction, requested to visit Section 7. He had never before shown interest in the Vrexian family. His arrival made Hyanwu nervous. Counselor Vren was a tall reptilian being with silver scales and formal bearing. He entered the Vrexian quarters with his security escort, his expression unreadable. Day one was teaching the Cubs a new game when Vren arrived. The game involved rolling a ball back and forth, taking turns, practicing patience. Talrock had just successfully waited for his turn and was so proud he was chirping loudly. "You are the human maintenance worker," Vren said, his voice formal. "Yes, Counselor, my name is Day one. I have heard many things about you and these Cubs I wanted to see for myself." Vren watched as Venna rolled the ball, waited for it to return, then rolled it again. "I must admit, I did not believe the reports. I thought perhaps the Cubs were drugged or trained somehow." Crix, curious about the new visitor, approached Counselor Vren. She chirped a question. Day one translated based on what he had learned. "She wants to know if you would like to play with them." Vren looked down at the small cub. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he lowered himself to sit on the floor. "I have not played a game in many years," he admitted. "But I suppose I can try." Crix, delighted, immediately rolled the ball to him. Vren caught it awkwardly with his clawed hands, then rolled it back. The other Cubs joined in, and soon they had the counselor surrounded, teaching him the rules of their game. Later, as Vren prepared to leave, he spoke quietly to Day one. "I have spent years believing that different species should maintain distance from each other, that mixing causes problems." He looked back at the Cubs, who were waving goodbye. "I think perhaps I have been wrong." That night, Vorath and Sokra returned from Nexus Prime. The Cubs rushed to their parents, chirping excitedly, trying to tell them everything that had happened. Vorath's markings glowed brightly with relief and joy as he held his children. "How did it go?" Day one asked. Sokra's expression was weary but hopeful. "Ambassador Taeyang's documentation helped more than we imagined. When the guild members saw the videos of our Cubs playing with human children, saw the community defending them, saw even Counselor Vren playing with them, attitudes shifted. They renewed our trading license. More than that," Vorath added, "other predator species approached us. They want to know how to achieve what we have achieved, how to help their children be accepted." Day one smiled, watching the Cubs show their parents a drawing they had made. "You just have to give people a chance to see the truth. That children are children, regardless of what they look like." 3 weeks after Vorath and Sokra returned from Nexus Prime, Station Valora seemed like a completely different place. The Vrexian cubs moved freely through the corridors now, often accompanied by children from other species. A small pack of young beings followed them around, playing games and exploring together. It was a sight that still surprised some residents, but most had grown accustomed to it. Then the accusations began. It started with an anonymous message posted on the station's public network. The message claimed that the Vrexian family was dangerous, that they were using mind control or drugs to make beings accept them. It suggested that Day One had been compromised somehow, that his behavior was not natural. The message demanded an investigation and called for the immediate removal of the Vrexian family from the station. More messages followed. A group calling themselves the Species Purity Movement began distributing documents that twisted facts and spread fear. They claimed to have evidence of Vrexian violence on other stations. They questioned why humans were so eager to defend predators. They suggested that allowing predator species to integrate would lead to tragedy. Haiyan Wu brought Day One the news during a maintenance shift. The council is calling an emergency hearing. The Species Purity Movement has enough support to force a formal review of the Vrexian family's residency permit. That is ridiculous, Day One said, his hands tightening around his tools. The cubs have not hurt anyone. The family follows every rule. I know. But fear is powerful, and these people are very good at spreading it. Haiyan Wu looked troubled. You will need to testify at the hearing. G1 and Eunji are preparing documentation, but personal testimony carries weight. The hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. The cubs sensed something was wrong. Their parents were stressed, their markings showing irregular patterns. Crick stopped bringing Day One gifts. Venna lost her usual energy. Talrock asked fewer questions. Do we have to leave? Crix asked one evening, her voice small. Sokra had been teaching Day One some of the Vrexian language, so he understood the simple question. No, he told her firmly. We will not let that happen. The day of the hearing arrived. The council chamber was packed with beings from across the station. The Species Purity Movement had organized their supporters, and nearly half the audience wore their symbol. A badge showing separated circles representing different species. Councillor Vren presided over the hearing. He looked tired and stern. We are here to review the residency status of the Vrexian family. The Species Purity Movement has brought concerns to this council that must be addressed. The movement's spokesperson was a being named Carlith, tall and imposing, with a voice that carried authority. He presented his case with practiced skill. We do not question that the Vrexian family has followed station rules. What we question is the unnatural acceptance they have received. Beings who should naturally fear predators are instead welcoming them. We have evidence that suggests manipulation. He displayed manipulated images and out-of-context videos that made innocent interactions look suspicious. He questioned Day One's mental state, suggesting he had been affected by Vrexian pheromones or technology. He painted a picture of danger hiding behind a facade of friendliness. When it was time for the defense, Ambassador Taeyang stood. The council has heard accusations built on fear and misunderstanding. Now hear the truth? G1 presented unedited videos of the cubs playing, learning, and interacting with other children. Yunji shared her research on human pack bonding and cross-species relationships. Dr. Thelvix provided scientific data showing no evidence of manipulation or control. Then it was Day One's turn to speak. He walked to the center of the chamber, feeling dozens of eyes on him. He was not good at public speaking. He was just a maintenance worker. But he thought about Crick's hiding behind him in the marketplace, about Venna's excitement when she learned something new, about Talrock's endless curiosity. I am not a scientist or a diplomat, he began. I just fix things. When I met the Vrexian family, I saw beings who needed help with their environmental controls. I saw parents trying to keep their children comfortable. I saw cubs who were curious about everything just like any children would be. He paused, gathering his thoughts. People say I must be controlled or drugged to not fear them. But I was never afraid because I never saw anything to fear. The cubs are just children. They play games. They get excited about new things. They feel sad when they are sick. They love their parents. His voice grew stronger. If accepting that makes me compromised, then I am proud to be compromised. A murmur ran through the audience. Some beings looked thoughtful. Others still looked skeptical. Then something unexpected happened. The doors to the chamber opened, and Vorath and Silkra entered with the 3 cubs. The cubs were supposed to be in supervised care during the hearing, but they had apparently convinced their babysitter to bring them. Crix saw Day One standing in the center of the chamber, and immediately ran to him. She did not care about the crowd or the formal setting. She just knew her friend was there. Venna and Taurok followed close behind. Karlith pointed at the cubs. "See, this proves our point. These creatures are unpredictable and dangerous. They should not be allowed in official proceedings." But the cubs were not acting dangerous. They were acting like frightened children. They pressed against Day One, their markings showing distress. Crix made a soft, scared sound. Day One crouched down, gathering all 3 cubs close. "It is okay," he told them quietly. "You are safe." The entire chamber watched in silence as the 3 Vrexian cubs, the supposed dangerous predators, sought comfort from a human. Their vulnerability was clear and undeniable. These were not monsters. These were children who were scared and confused. Counselor Vren leaned forward in his seat. The cubs appeared distressed. "Young Crix, can you tell us why you came here?" Crix looked up at the counselor. She had been practicing Galactic Common, the universal language used on the station. Her pronunciation was slow and careful, but understandable. "Day One safe," she said, each word clear. "Day One pack." Those 2 simple sentences changed everything. An elderly being in the audience stood up. It was the same furry being who had defended the cubs in the marketplace. "I am ashamed that I am sitting here listening to this trial. Those cubs are part of our community. They play with our children. They bring joy and curiosity to Section 7. We should be protecting them, not questioning whether they deserve to exist here." Another voice joined in. "My daughter talks about Crix every day. She has never had a better friend." A merchant stood. "The cubs visit my shop every week. They are always polite and gentle." More beings began speaking, sharing stories of interactions with the cubs and the family. The tide of opinion in the room was shifting visibly. Even some beings wearing the Species Purity Movement badges looked uncertain. Counselor Vren raised his hand for silence. "It is clear that this hearing has revealed important truths, though perhaps not the ones some expected." He looked directly at Karlith. "The investigation has found no evidence of manipulation or danger. What it has found is a family trying to live peacefully and a community learning to accept differences." He stood, his posture formal and commanding. "The Council grants the Vrexian family permanent residency status on Station Valora. Furthermore, we are establishing new protections for all predator species on this station. No family will face discrimination based solely on their appearance or evolutionary history." The chamber erupted in mixed reactions. Many beings applauded. The Species Purity Movement members protested loudly. But the decision was made. As the crowd dispersed, Karlith and several movement leaders tried to leave quickly. Han Wu and his security team intercepted them. "You are being detained for investigation. We have evidence that you planted false documents and manipulated recordings. That is illegal under station law." The following weeks brought many changes. The Species Purity Movement was disbanded after investigations revealed their leaders had been spreading false information deliberately. Several members were fined or removed from the station. Ambassador Taeyang used the momentum to negotiate broader agreements. He contacted leaders from other stations, sharing documentation of Station Valora's success. Multiple stations began implementing similar protections for predator species families. Day One received a promotion offer. The station wanted him to head a new cultural integration division, helping different species understand each other. He politely declined. "I like fixing things," he told the administrator. "That is what I am good at." But he did accept the special designation as an honorary member of the Vrexian family. Vorath and Silkra held a small ceremony, presenting him with a carved token made from crystal found on their homeworld. It was a rare honor, one usually reserved for blood relatives. You are packed now, Vorath said, his deep voice filled with emotion. Not by birth, but by choice. That bond is even stronger. 6 months after the hearing, Station Valora had become a model for interspecies cooperation. The changes were visible everywhere. Predator species families who had been hiding now lived openly. Mixed species playgroups were common. The marketplace that once feared the Vrexians now hosted a monthly cultural festival where different species shared their traditions. The cubs had grown larger and more confident.